big fear is that because of the Repatriations Act, if someone goes to these locations, tests them, finds that they belong to a particular Indian tribe for some reason, like artifacts are found in them, and they're able to isolate and say, oh, that belongs to this local tribe, then the farm could be taken over by the tribe.
And there's another place, I think it's in Missouri, where they've actually rebuilt what the wooden posts used to look like. Because when they first found these mounds, they were like, oh, they're giant piles of dirt. And they're like, oh, some of these are like structures and stuff. Certain new evidence that has come forward about the Michigan relics, it kind of will put the thing into a whole new perspective, not even just for LDS people, but it'll be like, like a History Channel documentary.
Welcome to another episode here on Zion Media. We have an awesome episode laid up for you today. We have, of course, our esteemed guest, Brian Nettles, that's becoming now, I'd say, a regular. What do you think, Brian? I mean, you've been on this Zion Media.
It's been a few times. It's been good. I like the platform you guys have. I like talking. I like you guys, and you do a very good job at editing these videos too. And
well, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a really good platform.
And of course, we have Latter-day Chad and the real MacGyver here on this episode. And I believe that this is, we have so many episodes.
And we have
Brian.
Shane Baldwin here too, it looks like.
Oh, you're right.
You look
right.
You look really different. Did you shave or something? Like what's going on?
You don't remember? We've been going to the tanning salon.
The tanning. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure the real Shane Baldwin would actually not say salon, but either way, yes, the Lion, David the Lion Douglas here, as a stand-in. Shane is actually gone on his way to hang out with his kids for spring break, which is phenomenal. He gets to spend a whole week with his kids. And then the Key is not here, again, because he's focusing on Babylon, working on some businesses, building that up. And so you got all of us here with Brian Nettles. And so we're excited. Brian, how about we have you share your screen so we can get ready to see the information here?
Oh, share the screen? Okay, let me...
Yeah.
Let me first pull up the website. I don't have the website pulled up yet.
Yeah, no problem. And we're really excited for what you have to share with us. Maybe you can just kind of give us a preface of what you're talking about.
Okay, let me get you the screen.
And if we have any technical difficulties, realize it's because we're going to have an amazing episode.
Okay, you can see it now, right?
Yes, I can. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about what you have planned for us today.
Okay, so on the last episode, we talked about Zarahemla. And now I always like to kind of put a little preface here, is that, when it comes to talking about geography, see, the Book of Mormon is a book of scripture. It's a book about the doctrines of Jesus Christ, the words of prophets. It's much more important than geography. And sometimes I don't even really like getting into the geography piece, just because a lot of times it tends to be a very contentious subject. And that's the last thing that I want to do, is bring up contentions. Yet at the same time, I've been blessed in a very real way that, I've taken a hold of some of the teachings that have in the past been put out by, say, Rod Meldrum or Wayne May or Jonathan Neville about where Zarahemla is, based on Doctrine and Covenants 125, 126, buy up the lands across the river from Nauvoo and let the name Zarahemla be placed upon it. And so I did a lot of research in the past on Zarahemla itself, but then to me, it's not complete if you don't look at the other surrounding cities. Like when you're reading in the book of Alma, particularly, Alma talks about his trip to Ammonihah. And he gives some important hints as to how to get to Ammonihah. And you'd think that if Zarahemla is across the river from Nauvoo, then if you go north, you're going to find something that's going to somewhat match the descriptions given there. And then the same thing comes with Antionum and Jershon. There are hints in the book of Alma as to where Antionum and Jershon are. And if you follow those hints, you'd think that you'd find something there to match the context of what he's saying. And then once again, you've got the city of Manti. And once again, there are hints in the book of Alma as to where you would find the city of Manti. And so I've been to all of these places, or at least areas that I think fit the description. And so what I want to do today is go over these locations to tell you where they're at and tell you what I found there. And then, you can make your own decision as whether or not it makes sense to you as to whether or not that is actually those locations. Or even in myself, it's like, yeah, I think that's where these places are. I don't really know for certain, but I think it's where they are. It fits my description. It satisfies me that these actually may be the Book of Mormon locations. So
that sounds amazing. I can't wait to see where they are.
now I know Latter-day Chad, you tend to be a Heartlander, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
that's actually what sort of convinced me. I was more convinced of like the conspiracies of the lost tribes coming to North America before I was convinced of the Book of Mormon. I'm more open. Like, I think that they went all over, but I'm definitely more convinced of Heartland evidence.
Yes. And how about MacGyver? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I lean heavily towards the Heartland. I haven't studied intently, but I just know that there's so many things that don't fit with the Meso model. So,
Okay. And David Douglas?
Oh yeah, I started my YouTube career on the Heartland with the Ancient Answers series. So, but I am a lot more open than I have been. I just don't think that the Meso is the sole answer.
Yeah. I will also say that, I actually took some cues from, say, Brant Gardner. I've listened to some of his arguments, and he actually caused me to change my location of where I thought Manti was. So sometimes you learn from both sides.
mhm.
So
Yeah, I would say I don't think that, like, I think there were probably Nephites and Lamanites in Mesoamerica, but I don't think what we have, the ruins that we have there, are necessarily from them. Like, they seem to have much more like East Asian influence. They look like Hindu temples, and they're way too recent. And there are ruins, there are mounds in Mesoamerica that, we haven't uncovered and are much older. But in North America, I definitely see more of like a Hebrew connection, where in Mesoamerica, I'll see like a hand of Miriam or something on the walls, and that's it. And then some language that's not even related to Egyptian or Hebrew.
Yeah. Now, one of the verses in the Book of Mormon itself, and I don't have this opened up, but there's a particular verse in either First or Second Nephi where it talks about the land of where it says the land of the New Jerusalem is the land that has been consecrated to the seed of the children of Lehi. And when I read that particular verse, and I don't know where it is right now, but I know it's there. That to me was kind of the nail in the coffin for me, is to believe in that. It has to be North America. It can't be further down south. And so that's just kind of where I stood with it. David, you're smiling. What are you smiling about?
There he goes.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of a personal experience. I had a dream once where it was about Book of Mormon geography, actually. And what I was shown in this dream, I mean, this could just be a dream or whatever, but I was shown, it's like, one thing that confuses people is that they think that the Nephites and the Lamanites were the only people in this land. And what I saw in the stream is that they arrived, there were already people here, and that there are descendants of Lehi and Nephi all over. But I would also say we see the highest concentration of the haplogroup X, DNA, and all that stuff in North America, where there's a little bit. I've seen on the map, there's a little patch down in like Mexico, sort of near the Gulf of Mexico. There's a little patch of the same sort of DNA, so it shows that there's cross trading. I know in Ohio, when I went to the Hopewell Mountains there in the museum, you could see that there were shark teeth. There were things that were found in Mesoamerica. There are things like parrot feathers. So we don't get the full picture in the Book of Mormon, I would say, for the people that are hardcore Mesoamerican people watching. But there is very strong evidence that there was cross trading and obviously crossing populations between North and Mesoamerica. And you have to ask yourself, why in Second Nephi, when they first show up, are they warning about polygamy? If it's just this tiny group of people, it's like, why are they saying don't practice polygamy? Don't have many wives and concubines?
It's interesting about you saying that, because when you actually, we have a record that came to us. It's not quite in the Nemenhah, but it feels like it's the same like timeline or period. And there was an Asian, a person that came from Asia to these lands in America. And what ends up happening is he ends up talking about like all these things that the people of the, I think it was part of the Nemenhah.
No, that is part of the Nemenhah. I think that's,
yeah, you're exactly right. And so
Book of Manti, because that's one of the only ones I've read.
You might be right. It's and this gentleman, he basically, and I call him a gentleman, but he came with a lot of wisdom. The people of the Nemenhah were resonating a lot with a lot of what he said. They agreed with him. But then right when he would get to the part about having multiple wives, they were like, okay, let's listen to him and let's let him speak. And then they took some time to really discern and pray about it, and they came back to him after some prayer and told him that you might want to check back with the spirit on that one. And wonderfully so, he actually considered what they said. I guess there was enough relationship and friendship there, but ultimately he checked in with the Holy Ghost and found out, what, you're right. And then with the knowledge that he gained from the Spirit, he went back to his people to correct the mistakes that he made.
He probably got killed when he went back because they didn't like him.
It was probably like one of Genghis Khan's people that came over
you want
here.
me to get a divorce.
But I do think that we're going to be surprised how much cross-oceanic contact was had before Columbus. It's going to be like, holy crap, there were people talking to each other all over. And even with the DNA maps, we can see DNA that came from the Middle East, and it's there. And then we see Asian DNA, and we see some of the Middle Eastern DNA starting to go back over the land group to the Asian people. And that sort of lessens and goes stops. And you see this stuff in the DNA maps, that there was like, okay, there was not one migration of people to the Americas. And I think that is going to shock a lot of people either way, because a lot of people think, oh, it's just the Nephites and Lamanites.
Another factor that I think is a significant thing to consider when you consider Taylor Hanson's book on He Walked to the Americas, it appears that Jesus went everywhere. Yeah. I mean, Alaska, Canada, United States, Mexico, South America. He was everywhere. Everybody saw him.
I mean, just the way populations grow. I mean, if there was like two dudes from the Nephites who went all the way down in South America, they would be seed of Lehi then, right?
That's right.
Though it's interesting. So I was reading through, I got a copy of the complete Dead Sea Scrolls, and I flipped to a page, and there is something that's like called the Scroll of Joseph in it. And the prophecy says that while the other tribes of Israel will be dispersed throughout the world, the tribes of Joseph will be taken away into a strange land. And that's right there in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Interesting. Okay. Well, shall we get to my report now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I just did want to say one thing.
Go ahead.
And you're probably familiar with this, Brian, but the copper that was in Michigan or the upper Midwest, copper extractions have been matched, and some of the copper in the Middle East has been found to match. So there's been intercontinent commerce of some kind, at least with copper, and that's been identified.
John Lefton called me out. John Lefton called me last night from the Heartland Research Group, and he's actually spearheading this research with the Swedes. And he says he was telling me that they're down to parts per billion with their analyses of the copper, and he thinks that they're within 2 weeks of proving that to be correct.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go ahead and open up the website Book of Mormon Heartland.com. You
Yep,
there?
we've got it open on the screen.
Okay, let me go to the geography and archaeology section. And like I said last time, I have this disclaimer because I don't like the contention that goes with the archaeology piece. But what we're going to be looking at today are, okay, so we talked about Zarahemla last time, and it looks like I spelled Zarahemla wrong. That's okay. Ammonihah, Jershon, Antionum, and Manti. And we're going to go over the scriptures that kind of indicate where Ammonihah might be. And then I'm going to show you what I found in a place that might be a good fit. We're going to talk about Jershon and Antionum, where they might be, and why I think that they are there, and show you the mounds that are a good fit. And we're also going to talk a little bit about Manti being down in the St. Louis area, being at the head of the River Sidon. And I will show you some images of mounds that I found out there too. So let's go ahead and go to Ammonihah, and I'll explain what I see there. So when you're in Alma chapter 8, verses 3 through 6, basically it says Alma first went to Melech, which is on the west of the River Sidon, and afterwards he traveled 3 days' journey north to Ammonihah. So we're using Zarahemla as the marker. We don't know where Melech is, except that it's west of the River Sidon. Perhaps it was north. It makes sense he would go the same direction of where he's going to get to Ammonihah. So he stops in at Melech, and then he goes to Ammonihah. 3 days journey. We don't know if the 3 days journey is by boat or if it's on foot. It's very possible he took a boat journey up there. And particularly, let's just paddle up the riverside, and whether it be with a group of 10 people all paddling together, or if it's one person, I'd say he probably walked it. I wouldn't want to paddle up a river that way as a one person. So we come to this place called the Toolsboro Mounds. And you can see, this is not me making it up. It's 100 BC to 200 AD. This is the landmark historic site, which is, I looked it up this morning. When did Alma go to Ammonihah? It was like 82 BC, maybe it was 88 BC. It was right there in that time period. So we have a perfect match from the archaeologists for this particular site. Okay. Where is it? You got Montrose, the Nauvoo, the proposed Zarahemla area, and Google Maps puts it at 59 miles away. Okay. It's right along the Mississippi River and the Illinois River. No, I think it's the Iowa River. Sorry, it's the Iowa River. Okay. So what is the significance of Ammonihah? I mean, it in the Book of Mormon, Ammonihah is very significant because that's where he went to preach the gospel. He was rejected. He intended never to return. The angel visited him and commanded him to return and to command them to repent. He gets back to Ammonihah. He meets Amulek. He stays in Amulek's home for, it seems like, a couple of weeks, converts the family, converts Amulek. He goes out preaching. He meets Zeezrom, who contends with him. And it was a heated exchange, which resulted in Zeezrom being silenced and leaving and going to a nearby city after the members of God's church, or at least those who believed in Jesus Christ, believed in Alma's religion. They were put to death. And Zeezrom feared that he was the cause of their death. And eventually Alma and Amulek, they burst their bands from prison. Many of the people, there was a big earthquake. They escaped from prison. And eventually they go and meet Zeezrom and heal him from his burning fever because of the intense hell that he had been experiencing. So Ammonihah is significant. Then also Ammonihah was destroyed not much later when Ammon preached to the people of King Lamoni, and eventually there was a great conversion there. And because the Lamanites were rejecting what was being taught to them, many were accepting, but many were rejecting it, and they went and destroyed Ammonihah. And then later again, Ammonihah is brought up again in the war chapters because Captain Moroni rebuilds the city, and it became a place where the Lamanites, they went to take over one city, and they're all like, okay, this is too hard. Let's go somewhere else. Let's go to Ammonihah. We could take that place, no problem. But Captain Moroni had rebuilt it. And so, it has defensive berms there, and they had a hard time at Ammonihah. They couldn't do it there. Okay. So you can see Ammonihah is significant in the history of the Book of Mormon. So in this place at the Toolsboro Mounds, so I'll just mention that when I got there, I pulled up. I was driving a truck at the time. I got there, and it was midnight when I showed up, and it was a very interesting experience for me because I felt like I was greeted. Now that doesn't, from an academic standpoint, that doesn't mean anything, but I know that I was greeted when I got there. It was very impactful to me. And, but it was midnight. I walked around a little bit, went to bed, got up in the morning, probably about 4 hours later, 5 hours later, when the sun was first coming up, and said, okay, I'm going exploring. And I went behind the park that followed a little road down, and I found this path, if you call it a path. It's I would say it's a defensive berm. And in the days of Captain Moroni, they built up the mounds of earth in a defensive berm platform. Then they placed pickets of wood on top of it, and with watch posts and all sorts of other things, and made it so it was very difficult for anyone to get through. And this mound was separating the river from the city. So now what I cannot prove is if this mound, so you can see right here, here's Toolsboro Mound. You got the Mississippi, you got the Iowa River, Lake Odessa, a lot of waterlands, and potentially the city was here at Toolsboro Mounds. Okay. So I don't know. Any thoughts on this? You guys are still there, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I was muted. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
It doesn't look like it's real high, does it? How high was it?
I'd say it's probably about 8 feet high.
8 feet.
high.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess if there were the defensive fences on top of it, you might be able to find some carbon dating or some kind of, if it got burnt, the charcoal.
Yeah, that would be the interesting thing, is if you were to run a magnetometer across it, would you find evidence of postals being there? And then if you find the evidence of the postals being there, then you could do the carbon dating on it. So it's very much, it's incomplete research. So
I know because I've been to the Newark Earthworks. I know they have sort of like a reconstruction there showing where they've actually found wooden posts on the mounds. And they have this little sign in the middle and shows where it, and there's another place, I think it's in Missouri, where they've actually rebuilt what the wooden posts used to look like. Because when they first found these mounds, they were like, oh, they're giant piles of dirt. And they're like, oh, some of these are like structures and stuff. And then long after the Book of Mormon was published, long after the Book of Mormon said that they built up earthworks with wooden structures, they find evidence of wooden structures. They find these holes where it used to be, and they carbon date it and all this stuff, and they find residue from wood that's been there. They find even remains of wood, I believe.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. You've got, now this is a question for Shane and Trevor, who are not here. You've been gifted some money to do research. And so I'm just going to say, this is a potential research project you could take up if you chose to do so. So, okay, let's go to the next place. Let's go to Antionum and Jershon. Geography. So we've got in Alma 31:3. Now the Zoramites had gathered themselves together in a land which they called Antionum, which was east of the land of Zarahemla, which lay nearly bordering upon the seashore, which was south of the land of Jershon, which also bordered upon the wilderness south, which wilderness was full of Lamanites. Okay, so we know that Antionum is east of Zarahemla. Antionum is near a seashore. Jershon is north of Antionum, and Antionum is bordered upon the wilderness south. And I shall assume that this means that the wilderness south is south of the city. It could also be read that Jershon borders upon the wilderness to its south. Okay. Lamanites are abundant in the wilderness south of the city. Okay. So I was tipped off. This one I was tipped off on by Cal Christensen because he lives in Nauvoo, and I visited him and did his tour of Zarahemla. And then he says to me, "Have you been to the Antionum? Have you been to the Rameumptom?" And I'm like, I'm listening. and so, he told me how to get there. And I think I misunderstood him, but he's also published a pamphlet, and I took some things from what he had published about the area where I'm going to talk about. So you've got this place, Havana, Illinois, which is across the Illinois River. Okay. What he was talking about for the Rameumptom, he was talking about a particular site called Rockwell Park, which is a conical mound. There's even you can see right here to the right that you've got a sign there that kind of describes it as being a jaredite mound, and it was conical. And I think it sometimes even receives the name of the Speaker's Mound, but it was a place where Lincoln and Douglas debated the presidency in the 1800s. So in U.S. history, it's a significant site. And there's more, but there was a person who told me, and I don't want to specify the name, that they met a person. I mean, this is a lot of hearsay that I'm going to go with, but a person who was old that lived there when he was young said that an Indian would go to the top of the hill, say a prayer, and then walk down. And then another Indian would go to the top of the hill, say a prayer, and go down. And so this is hearsay. I know who told it to me. I just don't know that I'm at liberty to say who it was that told it to me. But just know that there is reason to believe that it very well may be an original location where a Rameumptom was. And to be clear, there is more than one Rameumptom when you read in the Book of Alma about Antionum. There was more than one.
Here's a question. So you said Lincoln had a debate there. Do you think that could be at all linked to that speech he gave about the giants in the mounds that used to live here? Because I know Lincoln gave a speech about that at Niagara Falls. And then you're saying
I have no idea about that one. Yeah, I don't know about that.
So you don't know about that?
Okay. Means I didn't know that he gave a speech about the giants.
Oh yeah, like it was at Niagara Falls. So like I said, I got into this stuff not from like church stuff, but by researching these conspiracies, by researching Michigan relics, all this weird stuff. Like this stuff doesn't add up. And then there's Abraham Lincoln in the 1800s at Niagara Falls giving a speech about the giants who used to roam these lands and who built the mounds.
Yeah. Okay. And a lot of people believe that the Jaredites were the Adena, and the Adena were a large people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could be. Okay. So let me go back. So I make my own little made up map of where I think Antionum was and Jershon, making it so that Jershon is north of Antionum. That's just my own made up thing. But now here's one thing that you get out of Cal Christensen's write up is he points to a document, and I actually have the document right here. If you clicked on it, you'll get this document about Thompson Lake that was emptied out. And so this preserve area was an area of lake, and this is an area of lake today. And this is the Illinois River. So it satisfies the question of, is it by the seashore? Because you're by lakes. And I seem to recall Jonathan Neville recently talking about the definition of seashore could also be river shores. Okay. But anyways, there is evidence that there was seashore anciently, and as there was seashore there in the 1800s. Okay. So now let me show you a couple other mounds. So we've got Havana, which has potentially a Rameumptom. And now I want to show you this area right here, because if you cross the Illinois River on Highway 136, let me show you what I find. Okay. It says Lacey Ditch right here on this sign. This is the bridge of the Illinois River. You got a Jeep there. That Jeep's probably still there. Okay. And then you go behind the Jeep, and now I've got this huge berm, huge, up and down on both ends. Now, once again, I haven't done the research. Someone might say, oh, that was made by the Army Corps of Engineers. It's possible it was made by the Army Corps of Engineers for flood control. That's further research that needs to be done. Once again, if it was not created by the Army Corps of Engineers, it sure be nice if the magnetometer went across it and to determine if there are post holes that could be carbon dated. Okay. So here's another image of that same berm. Trying to make it larger now. Okay. It goes forever. I couldn't walk to the end of it. And now I turn around and I look at the road, and you look at the road is up on high ground. And once again, okay, is that of modern make, or did they simply build the road on top of the existing berm that was already there? I don't know the answer. Okay. Now let me show you another. Now, if you go about another 5 miles away to Duncan Mills, okay, just north of the Spoon River, these things are everywhere. Here's me at the base of this mound. I went there with my son about 7 years ago. It's private property, but you could drive onto it. Well, don't take my word for that. I did. Okay. And I took this video. And I cut out the sound because I said some things in it that I don't agree with today. But anyways, you could just see that this mound is absolutely huge. It's circling this. They simply built this farm inside this mound. It just goes for miles. And okay, so you can see it turns and goes much deeper, and the mound is still there. And then it turns again, and you can see the mound there. I mean, that thing's got to be like 5 miles long. Okay.
Yeah, look at all that.
Yeah, now you've got hills and cattle. So now when I drove around the area, these mounds of this sort were not just secluded, not just this one. It wasn't just one. I would look to my left, I would look to my right, driving up and down the road, and I was seeing them all over the place. So remember with Jershon, you might think, oh, well, that's where the people of Ammon were. They were not the war people. They weren't the ones building the mounds. But when you consider that Antionum was the protector to the land of Jershon, and after Antionum fell to the Lamanites, Captain Moroni moved into Jershon. The people of Ammon had to move out and find another home, and Captain Moroni built up the place. So it's very possible that these are literally the mounds of Captain Moroni. But once again, they're not tested. There's no carbon dating done. It's completely incomplete research here. Okay.
Yeah, that'd be
Any
really
questions or
great if we
commentary?
could go ahead and test that. Because, I mean, I hope for a day where we can take a look at these mounds a lot closer. I know some of them are sacred, but it'd be great to have some method to really view what's going on with them.
Yeah. The
Yeah,
technology is there. Go ahead.
I have a question. So, isn't there some sort of federal law that was passed at some point where it's like we're not even allowed to do archaeology on the mounds anymore? Or what's the deal with that? I remember
Well,
hearing.
I think the biggest, I don't know if that's the case. What I was told is that the big fear is that because of the Repatriations Act, if someone goes to these locations, tests them, finds that they belong to a particular Indian tribe for some reason, like artifacts are found in them, and they're able to isolate and say, oh, that belongs to this to this local tribe, then the farm could be taken over by the tribe. And so those who own the lands don't want the research done because it could literally cause them to lose their land.
That makes sense. Because I do know, like, it feels like in the 1800s, there was all this crazy stuff being found all the time. And
Yeah.
now there are all these mounds that haven't even been touched. Zero archaeology done on them. And they're just left alone. Nobody wants to know about them anymore.
Now that you're saying that, notice that Dixon Mound State Museum is right here. That is a Hopewell Museum. Very interesting. I have a friend who knows locals from this city, Havana, and what he was told, and I've spoken with one of the locals, is that if you go back 40 years ago, 1980s or 70s, whenever they were digging up the land to build roads, they were always finding artifacts.
And then,
Now, if you want to find out where those artifacts are now, well, that's a different question because at least those that I spoke with didn't know where the artifacts ended up. Maybe some of them ended up in Dixon Mound State Museum. I don't know.
yeah, I mean, I don't want to start any conspiracies here, but I know I have people who are not LDS that have DM'd me on Instagram. Like, I hear all these stories about some farmer in Ohio, and they dig up and they find some weird artifact that doesn't fit the narrative. And then these guys in suits just show up and they take away the artifact. I mean, I haven't personally seen any of this stuff happen, but there's certainly rumors about that. I mean, if those are false rumors, those are false rumors. But it is interesting that there's a lot of stories about weird stuff disappearing, and, you know, it makes you wonder what's going on.
Yeah. And then one other thing I want to say is it is my belief that this border of the Illinois River is probably where the Wilderness South is located. And you see the Wilderness South of where that was full of Lamanites reference when you're talking about Manti also. And this is a little bit of a narrative because when you look at most of the Heartlanders and their maps, they typically draw their border of the Lamanite lands as being south of the Ohio River and the Nephites being north of the Ohio River. I kind of take a little different view on that because I seem to think that prior to Captain Moroni's offensive expedition to take the lands east in the land of Bountiful, is that the borders of the Nephite lands were probably drawn at the Illinois River, with the exception of the city Bountiful, which I actually have not found is the city Bountiful based off of this dynamic that I've laid out here. But then once Captain Moroni is done with his offensive expansion of territory and booting Lamanites out of those lands, then the Ohio River then became the new border of the Nephite lands. And so that's where I kind of differ from most of the other Heartland maps. Okay. Shall we move on?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. Now let's talk about Manti. So, first of all, a lot of people have reported Manti as being in Randolph County. That's where I originally had it written up in my website. And the little story that I have is, you see, if you look in Joseph Fielding Smith's book, Doctrines of Salvation, he talks about Manti being in Randolph County. And I don't really know how the rumor started that that's where Manti was. But Randolph County is not at the head of the River Sidon. And so, I actually went there, and my friend, gosh, I'm terrible with remembering names. But anyways, my friend showed me around the area, and I found some potentially defensive berms and reported on it. But I've pretty much taken down that webpage because I no longer think that that's where Manti was. They might be defensive berms there. I don't know. They weren't that large, and they were on a farm. Okay. But anyways, I shifted to Manti after I listened to Brant Gardner talk about Manti being a strategic location, and then re-looking up the verses in the scriptures about it. And yeah, Manti is supposed to be where the head of the River Sidon is. So let's go ahead and look at some of the verses that cover that. So Alma 17:1, and now it came to pass that as Alma was journeying from the land of Gideon southward away to the land of Manti, behold, to his astonishment, he met with the sons of Mosiah journeying towards the land of Zarahemla. Okay, so It seems that Manti is along the river Sidon. Alma 16:6, and it came to pass that Alma inquired of the Lord concerning the matter, and Alma returned and said unto them, Behold, the Lamanites will cross the river Sidon in the south wilderness, away up beyond the borders of the land of Manti. Behold, there shall ye meet them on the east of the river Sidon, and there the Lord will deliver unto thee thy brethren who have been taken captive by the Lamanites. And this is talking about the when Ammonihah was destroyed, was ransacked, and they were carrying captives. Okay, and then it says, and it came to pass that Zoram and his sons crossed over the river Sidon with their armies and marched away beyond the borders of Manti into the south wilderness, which was on the east of the river Sidon. So this verse right here is kind of intriguing to me because it's tying the south river that had Lamanites into it to the city or to the borders of Manti, to the river Sidon, and that's where Zoram had their battle where they were able to take back the captives that had been taken prisoner of war from Ammonihah and Noah and other neighboring cities. Okay. So if we go back to the map, if we go to the map of St. Louis, you've got the Illinois River right here. You've got the Mississippi or the River Sidon. You've got the Missouri River. And so it kind of makes sense if they're trying to get into the wilderness south. And what I was saying about Antionum and Jershon being along the Illinois River, and that the lands south or southeast to it is the land where is the wilderness south that was full of Lamanites, that they may have been trying to come down here and crossing the Mississippi River here to get to the south wilderness. And so that's just a theory there, but that might be where that battle took place, near in the borders of St. Louis or Manti. Okay. Any comments, any thoughts about that?
Well, I had a thought that you mentioned funding for research. How much money would it take to investigate some of these spots?
It's not a lot. It's probably in the tens of thousands if you get the permission. I mean, first of all, the first research has to be done in the libraries and in the city records, because the city records and the library would probably answer the question as to whether or not they were created by the Army Corps of Engineers. Okay. And that would answer the question right there. Okay. It was the dead end. It was a red herring. But if it comes up that they are ancient, then the renting of a magnetometry machine, if you're just renting the machine, is not that expensive, but you might want to rent it with someone who's trained on it. And so that increases the price some. And then you've got the drilling of, the core sample drilling. And that also, it's in the thousands. It's not in the tens of thousands, but it's in the thousands. And so my guess is that probably $30,000 and you can get some good research done.
Wouldn't it be fascinating if the church just came in and, I'm thinking about Elder Holland's post on today. Like today, March 27th, Elder Holland just posted about Isaiah. And I think that's the first time I've really heard him. Well, it was actually Second Nephi, but it's a reference to Isaiah. And I feel like they're getting to some of the important stuff. I wonder what this general conference is going to be like. But I bring this up. I kind of even segue into, Elder Holland's post is there's so much to be discovered. And I'm thinking, man, wouldn't it be amazing if the church did do some of this kind of research or funding or, driving into finding out more about this. And it doesn't have to be just the church, but just some organization that really
my personal opinion on it is that the church is probably not focused on this type of research. And I think that there's plenty of wealthy people out there that would fund it if it were presented to them that this is what we want to do and this is how we're going to do it, that you would have people step forward and drop in the up to $100,000 to research some of these mounds to see if they are ancient and to prove that they are ancient and to see if they date to Captain Moroni.
I think it's a matter of finding the right mounds as well, right?
Exactly.
Did you ever hear about the mound that me and David found on the way driving back from Missouri?
No?
So it was a few miles to the east or to the south, I remember, of Mound City in Missouri, and we're driving, and we drive by this like hill, this mountain, and it's like, that looks like a pyramid. It's just on the side of the highway, so we pull off and we go, it's just this random property that was like for sale, and all around it, all around the mountains, there were these ridges, and it looked like the Cahokia Mound almost.
Okay.
And so I sent that stuff to Wayne May's team for them to look at. I gave them the GPS address. I did all this stuff with it. So
yeah. Now, just when it comes to the hills like Cahokia, those are considered to be temple mounds from the archaeologists, and these temple mound structures typically postdate the Book of Mormon. On this map right here, this star right here, this is Cahokia. Okay, and so I did go to Cahokia, and yeah, they're not defensive berms. They're kind of like temple mounds in the
like a temple
where the leader of the city resides. The spiritual leader of the city, or the king, or something like that. I did come over into this area and checked out mounds in this area. That's why I have a star here. But I think it was actually closer to here. Let me show you a couple of those. And oh, by the way, St. Louis was originally called Mound City. This is from Wikipedia. That area that became St. Louis was the center of Native American Mississippian culture, which built numerous temple and residential earthwork mounds on both sides of the river. Their major regional center was Cahokia, active from 900 to 1500 AD. Due to numerous major earthworks within St. Louis boundaries, the city was nicknamed as Mound City. These mounds were mostly demolished during the city's development. Historic Native American tribes in the area encountered by the early Europeans included the Siouan-speaking Osage people, whose territory extended west and the Illinois. Okay, yeah. So lots of mounds in St. Louis. They're not there anymore. Here's Cahokia.
Man. Yeah, it looked a lot like that, but it was more of like a pyramid-like shape.
And there were trees all around, but yeah, it really was like that. There was multiple mounds like this all around. It felt like part of Mound City or some city.
Yeah, I mean, it was miles away from Mound City, like driving on the highway. Who knows how long it was? But our last stop was at Mound City. Though, from what I understand, the Mississippian culture is kind of like a later merger of like the remnants that were in North America, and then some like Aztecs and people like that came up north, and they kind of merged cultures.
That's my understanding too. Okay, so here's more Cahokia. That's okay, the other side of the road. And then let me show you what I found in that northern quadrant of the St. Louis area. This is not as profound, but this is farm area. And so here's one particular farm with a mound that looks very much like that mound that I saw in what I called Jershon and Antionum. Okay, so this is in the agriculture area in the northeast quadrant of St. Louis, near the Mississippi, in between the Mississippi River and the Missouri River. And so, yeah, more in the distance of that same type of berm. Okay. So that's pretty much what I wanted to show today.
That's great stuff. It's really interesting because, I mean, I don't know when we're doing this. Chad, you might know this better, but it's going to be a lot of fun to do a Key of David in the field out to these areas, or it won't be a Key of David in the field, but I know that we have plans to go out to some of these areas to film, and we're in the works of making that a reality.
But, yeah. And I think the biggest thing to start, I know there's a couple other things that I know about that I'm not sure if I'm allowed to talk about, but I do know that the Michigan relics one is going to be like the big thing to blow it open. Like, I'm after that video drops, I'm going to get something to automatically send it to all 20,000 of my Instagram followers to look at right away. This Michigan relics documentary, and with certain new evidence that has come forward about the Michigan relics, it kind of will put the thing into a whole new perspective, not even just for LDS people, but it'll be like, like a History Channel documentary. And I do think that sort of thing, even just focusing on stuff, like when you put your energy towards things, people don't realize this, but like our spirits are in tune for things. When people are all together focusing on one thing, then there's going to be more people who start to sort of wake up to that thing, right? So I do think in the future, with these things going on, there's going to be more attention and more opportunity for these mounds to be excavated.
Okay. I hope that when you do this documentary, that make certain that you include Alex Koritz, whose family used to own the artifacts. He's very interested in it.
Okay.
He's even desirous to get other individuals involved in going to Lansing this summer, if allowed, if authorized um, the guy from America Unearthed.
Oh
I
yeah. Do
always,
you think you could
yeah,
get the contact info for him? Because maybe that's why we haven't been able to do it yet. It's because we were waiting for the stars to align so that guy can be in it. Because I
yeah,
mean, really, it's going to be like a thing. Like, we are going to go in person. We're going to look at the relics, and we're going to interview certain people who are experts.
okay,
And there's one person in particular that we've. One of the reasons it's on hold is because we're trying to get them in it. Which that guy, if we can get him on it, will be a huge thing.
okay, yeah. I'll forward you Alex's contact information today,
Okay.
and also let him know that you're trying to get a hold of him. If you could get me if you can get me your contact information, I could get that to him. That
Okay.
actually is the proper way to do it.
All right. We'll send that after the show.
Okay. Okay, great.
Well,
Okay.
thank you. Any other remaining comments that you guys might have about what we just?
MacGyver, you got anything to share? Anything to say?
Well, I know Shane, he is of the opinion he doesn't care where it
Yeah.
happened or if it happened. He's just got a testimony of the Book of Mormon through the Holy Ghost. And he says that he loves this stuff to a certain degree, but it doesn't affect his testimony. The Spirit is what testifies of truth. And the coming to Christ is very, very important. But I know on other people, this kind of information has either brought them back into the fold or brought them into the fold for the first time. And so the work that you and everybody else is doing is really, really good. But the knowledge of the truth of the Book of Mormon really, really comes from down on our knees or a witness of the Spirit.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say that you've got different types that different information appeals to greatly. So I know that some people with the DNA evidence and the archaeological stuff and just the arguing and bickering, that's just been a turnoff to some people. And so hopefully we can get the fullness of the truth and be united so that we can all be brothers and sisters in Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually I'm actually in alignment with Shane Baldwin in that area. I've completely gone full circle on it, where I originally had a testimony of the Book of Mormon based on the Spirit, and it was enough for me. But I was very curious. I wanted to know, well, where did these lands happen? You should be able to figure out where these lands happened. And then I got into Rod Meldrum stuff, and then Wayne May's stuff, and I was really consumed with it, and so I was consumed with it for a period of time, and until I was no longer consumed with it. And now I'm back to, hey, this is all good, interesting stuff, but let's not get too caught up in the politics of it. Let's not get caught up in the hey, maybe I'm wrong and maybe he's right, or vice versa. Maybe I'm right, maybe he's wrong. And let's just enjoy the fact that Jesus Christ is our Lord and our Savior. He came to visit the people It's recorded in the Book of Mormon that he came and visited and taught us. And let's focus on what Jesus Christ taught us and live our lives accordingly. And to me, that today is absolutely the most important thing. And all the rest of this stuff, if it benefits you to know, then hey, here it is. But if it doesn't benefit you to know, then go to the next channel, or the next page, I should say. So.
Yeah, and the book that you mentioned, He Walked the Americas by L. Taylor Hanson, I got that years ago, and I actually wrote to the publisher. She had passed, but the publisher sent me some incidental information. But the stories of the Native Americans have been so vastly dismissed for archaeological, for anthropological information. It just is shocking how easily our ancestors just ignored giant swaths of information that really testify that Jesus is the Christ and he did walk the Americas and other places.
Yeah.
Amazing. If I put my 2 cents in here, I'll also agree with Shane, is that for me, it never really mattered where the Book of Mormon was, which is kind of odd for someone that's like centered a whole channel around archaeology. But for me, it was never about that. It was always about the spirit that I felt in that book. I mean, I recall one time when I was in high school, and I felt like I was getting attacked spiritually, just nonstop negative feelings and thoughts. And the Spirit had told me to just hold the Book of Mormon in my hand and just put my finger in just between one of the pages, and just like a bookmark. And I just was going through class and going from class to class, holding the Book of Mormon in my hand like that. And I felt not only the attacks, spiritual attacks stop, but I even had someone, one of my teachers actually asked about the book I was holding. And I got to share a little bit about the Book of Mormon as a teenager, and I gave him a copy of the Book of Mormon. And just, the things that the Book of Mormon's done for me, it's truly changed my life. I was able to grow up, I was able to grow up with my mother and my grandmother as members of the church. I was able to seal some of my family together, including my mother, grandmother, and grandfather, who also is Native. And so it's never been about the archaeology. For me, the archaeology is just fun. It's fun, it's fascinating, and it's a trip. But, I thank you so much again, Brian, for coming on to Zion Media. It's always great to be able to have you share your knowledge and help guide us on this journey. For those that haven't been watching the Brian Nettles, I think I could call it a series of, Book of Mormon Heartland series on Zion Media. I think I'll just basically change all the thumbnails to match at least that. But it's been fascinating to go through Egyptian and to go through scripture, which is the most important part, and then to go ahead and look at these mounds, which is phenomenal. And I think all of our viewers, or many of our viewers, are fascinated too, because they want to be in these lands. It's like probably the same reason why I moved to Utah, is I wanted to be closer to the saints, because I'd seen so many videos about Joseph Smith the prophet being in Kirtland and eventually in Nauvoo, and going on Zion's camp, and actually people seeing the miracles. I wanted to see the miracles. And so I moved to Utah so I could be right here to see the miracles. And I think it's happening. I think we're starting to see the miracles and things open up for us here in 2025. It's just phenomenal. So thank you so much, Brian, for coming on. And, as for myself, David the Lion Douglas, and the real MacGyver and Latter-day Chad. Oh my goodness, I can't believe we have all of us here on Zion Media to be able to share this information. We will see you next time.
What if the ruins of Nephi's temple and city have been hiding in plain sight this whole time?
Whoa! Are you kidding me?
this was not just their temple, this was their classroom.
Monte Alban is one of the oldest capital cities in the Americas, built high above the Valley of Oaxaca in Mexico. Historians call it the ancient home of the Zapotec religious elite.
I could see Nephi and all these people sitting on the steps, and Nephi teaching them there.
In addition to a matching layout and size, an east-facing two-column temple with an altar and cisterns much like those of Solomon's temple, as well as a location fitting well with that required by the internal model of the Book of Mormon.
So, there's hardly anything like that.
Total right up there.
And this all dates to exactly the right date.
Could this be Nephi's city and temple?